Welcome to the deep dive. We'd love to get into the nitty-gritty. Today we're looking at Abu Dhabi and a question you might not have even thought to ask.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
How does Abu Dhabi manage to keep its lights on, the water running, and still make sure everything's affordable for people? It's a desert, right? Lots of challenges there.
It's a puzzle, for sure. A great case study, lots to unpack there. Most people think utility regulation is just about, keeping prices low, but it's way more complicated.
Yeah,
It's a balancing act, really, making sure people can afford the services, but also giving companies the space to, invest and improve things.
right, makes sense. So to get into this, we've got some excerpts from a big document all about how Abu Dhabi regulates its water and electricity. And one of the things that really jumped out is this big change that happened back in 1999.
Oh, yeah, 1999 was a huge turning point. Before that, it was all one big entity controlling the entire water and electricity sector, everything. But then they decided to shake things up. They unbundled it all. So separate companies for generation, transmission, distribution.
So, instead of having one company do it all, they split it up.
Exactly. And it was part of a global trend at the time. The idea was that competition would make everything more efficient, more transparency too.
Oh, okay. So, if you've got multiple internet providers, they have to actually, try harder to get your business.
Precisely. They can't just rest on their laurels. They have to compete on price and service.
Makes sense. But I imagine creating all those new companies probably led to some new headaches, right? Especially when it came to making sure the prices stayed fair.
Oh, absolutely. It's a whole new ball game. That's where the Department of Energy, or DOE, steps in.
The DOE.
Right. They were created to oversee all this, to keep everything running smoothly. And a big part of that is regulating prices, especially for companies that are still, in effect, monopolies.
Monopolies. Okay. Like who?
Well, you've got ADWEC, the main power generation company, and then there's Transco for transmission, and then you have ADDC and AADC handling the distribution. Without some kind of regulation, these guys could theoretically charge whatever they wanted.
Yikes. So what do they do to top that?
They use a system called CPIX regulations.
CPIX. Catchy. But what does that actually mean for, someone's electricity bill?
Well, CPI stands for the Consumer Price Index, like how they measure inflation.
Right.
And the X factor, well, that's a bit more technical, but basically it lets the DOE adjust how much revenue these companies are allowed to make over time. They consider all sorts of things, like investments the companies have to make, how efficiently they're running things.
Got it. So it's not just a fixed price. It adjusts over time.
Exactly. It has to be flexible, keep up with the changing economic landscape.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm guessing the DOE's job involves more than just setting prices. Do they, look into how things are actually running, how efficient everything is?
You bet. They keep a close watch on how companies like EWEC buy their fuel and manage their power generation, making sure they're getting the best deals, operating efficiently. It's about more than just price. It's about value for money.
Right, so they're not just, setting a price and walking away. They're really involved.
Oh, yeah, they're definitely in the mix, making sure no one's getting complacent.
Now, one thing I found super interesting in this document was all this talk about power and water purchase agreements, or PWPAs. What are those exactly?
Oh, PWPAs are fascinating. Basically, they're long-term contracts. EWEC acts as a single buyer, for the whole sector, and uses these agreements to lock in power and water from new generation and desalination plants.
Okay, so EWEC is kind of like the big shopper for everyone.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. A lot of these contracts are awarded through competitive bidding. So different companies go head-to-head to offer the best deals, the best terms.
So they're not just picking their friends, they're going with the same old companies all the time.
Nope. It's about encouraging competition, getting the best bang for the buck, and it really incentivizes innovation, too, which is crucial in a sector like this.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. The price controls, the competition, the DOE keeping a close eye on everything. It's like a multi-layered system to make sure everything runs smoothly and affordably.
It's all connected. That's the key.
But we just scratched the surface, right? We haven't even talked about things like wastewater or renewable energy or how the public gets involved in all of this.
Oh, there's so much more to explore. We're just getting started.
Okay, so Abu Dhabi, they're being pretty smart about all this. But are they thinking about the future? Sustainability and all that. It can't just be about cheap electricity, right?
That's a really important point. And yeah, Abu Dhabi's taking sustainability very seriously. It's not just about keeping prices down today. It's about making sure things are sustainable for, years to come. And that means moving away from fossil fuels, looking at renewables.
So it's not just those, big dusty power plants I'm imagining. What are they doing to, green up their energy mix?
Well, they've got some pretty ambitious targets for using renewable energy, and they're in a great spot for it, right? Tons of sunshine out in the desert. Solar's a big focus, obviously. But they're also exploring wind energy, even some waste-to-energy technology.
Wait, waste to energy. What, like turning garbage into electricity?
Yep, pretty amazing stuff. They can't waste that would normally go to a landfill and boom, turn it into clean energy. It's a win-win.
Wow, I did not know that. That's really cool. But I imagine using renewables comes with its own challenges, right? Like the sun's not always shining, wind's not always blowing. How do they make sure there's enough electricity when renewables are, well, kind of unpredictable?
It's a tough one, no doubt. And that's where the DOE's role is so important. They have to make sure there are incentives for companies to develop renewables, but also keep the lights on, keep prices stable. It's a balancing act.
So how do they do it? What are some of their, like, tricks of the trade?
One of the big ones is, you guessed it, competitive bidding. Those power and water purchase agreements, those PWPAs we talked about, well, they're using those more and more to lock in renewable energy capacity. So the DOE puts out a call, companies compete, best deal wins.
Ah, so it's like that market competition we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. They're using the power of the market to drive down costs, boost innovation, and get more renewables into the mix.
Smart.
And then there are feed-in tariffs. Basically, it's like a guaranteed price for the electricity that comes from renewable sources.
Okay, so that makes it less risky for companies to invest in those renewable projects, right?
You got it. It provides a stable revenue stream, so it's more appealing for investors. They're really pulling out all the stops to make Abu Dhabi a leader in clean energy.
They seem really committed to it.
They are, and they're not just doing this in a vacuum. One thing that sets Abu Dhabi apart is how they involve the public in all of this. They actually consult with people, get their input on what they're doing.
Wait, really? Like average citizens?
Oh yeah, consumers, industry experts, environmental groups, everyone gets a say. Before they set targets for renewables or efficiency, they hold these big consultations, gather feedback, suggestions.
So they're actually listening to what people think.
And not just listening, they take that feedback and use it to shape their decisions. It's a real collaborative process. It's pretty unique, actually.
That's amazing. So it's not just the DOE deciding everything behind closed doors.
Exactly. They get everyone involved. It's about building trust, making sure everyone feels like they're part of the process.
Okay, this is all making sense, but I want to circle back to something we mentioned earlier, that economic purchasing thing. It sounds like that's a big part of how they keep everything running smoothly.
It's fundamental, really. Economic purchasing is about making sure those companies that buy power, water, sewage treatment services like EWEC and ADSSC are getting the best deal.
Makes sense. We don't want them wasting money, especially since, like, those costs get passed down to us, right?
Precisely. And it's more than just finding the cheapest option. It's about looking at the whole picture. Like, how competitive was the bidding process? Are these companies reliable? What are the long-term implications?
So it's like being a really good shopper, but on a much bigger scale. Like making sure we're not getting ripped off.
That's a great analogy. And the DOE has a whole team of experts who analyze these decisions, make sure they're in line with those economic purchasing principles. They're really protecting the public interest, making sure every dollar or dirham is spent wisely.
It's all about accountability, huh? Making sure everyone's doing their part. So what happens if, like, a company isn't meeting those expectations?
Well, that's where the regulatory control periods come in. It's like setting targets and then checking in to see how everyone's doing.
Okay, break that down for me.
So imagine the DOE says, okay, over the next 5 years, we want to see these efficiency improvements, this much renewable energy, this level of customer service. And then they track those things, see how each company measures up.
So it's like a report card for the whole sector.
Exactly. And at the end of that period, if a company's fallen short, they might face stricter price controls next time around. But if they've exceeded expectations, they might get rewarded.
Ah, so it's like a built-in incentive to keep improving. You got to stay on top of your game.
You got it. It keeps everyone on their toes, drives innovation, and makes sure the sector as a whole is moving in the right direction.
It's fascinating how it all comes together. Abu Dhabi's really created a system that's both, like, efficient and adaptable. It's not just about keeping the lights on today. It's about building a better future.
And they're not afraid to experiment, try new things. It's a sector that's changing all the time, so you got to be willing to adapt.
This has been so eye-opening. I never thought I'd find utility regulations so interesting.
It's not always the flashiest topic, I'll admit, but it's crucial. It affects all of us, whether we realize it or not.
It really does. I think the biggest takeaway here is that utility regulation can actually be a force for good.
Absolutely. And Abu Dhabi is a great example of that. They've shown that it's possible to have a system that's affordable for consumers, good for business, and good for the planet.
And they've done it in a way that's really transparent and inclusive, which is really impressive.
It's about finding that sweet spot where everyone benefits.
So, to our listener, what would you say is, like, the most important thing to remember from all of this?
Don't underestimate the power of utility regulation. It might seem like a dry, technical field, but it has a huge impact on our lives. Stay informed, get involved, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
And remember, even something as seemingly mundane as utility regulation can be fascinating. It's It's all about looking deeper, seeing the connection.
Absolutely. There's always more to learn.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We've had a blast exploring the world of Abu Dhabi's Udur and electricity sector. Until next time, stay curious. All right, we're back and ready to wrap up our Abu Dhabi adventure. We've covered a lot of ground, from how they set prices and encourage competition to all those renewable energy projects and how they get the public involved. It's a pretty impressive system they've got going on over there.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff. Abu Dhabi's really shown that it's possible to create a system that works for everyone. Consumers get affordable services, businesses can thrive, and they're not ignoring the future of the planet.
Right, they've found that sweet spot. But for our listeners out there, what's the big takeaway? What should they remember from all of this?
Honestly, I think the most important thing to remember is that utility regulation matters. It might seem kind of boring on the surface, all those rules and regulations, but it has a huge impact on our lives.
It's easy to forget about, right? It's not exactly the most exciting topic.
Right, but it affects everything from how much we pay for our electricity to, what kind of a world we're leaving for future generations.
So we should all be paying more attention to what's happening with our utilities, how they're being regulated.
Absolutely. Stay informed, ask questions, get involved. You might be surprised by what's going on in your own community.
Yeah, maybe there are some innovative solutions being cooked up right under our noses.
Exactly. And, even though we've covered a lot today, this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's always more to learn, more to explore.
That's so true. This whole deep dive has really opened my eyes to how interesting and important utility regulation can be.
I'm glad to hear it. It's definitely a field worth paying attention to.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of Abu Dhabi's water and electricity sector. Until next time, keep asking questions and stay curious.